Back in the day in college, my friends and I used to love a good prank. If you can think of it, we probably did it. Fill someone's book bag with Cheetos. Done. Cover somebody's car with Post-it notes. Check. Continually jump out of hiding spots to scare people all the time. Now, admittedly, sometimes these pranks would go a little too far. And one example comes to mind. A bunch of us had gone to visit a parent's place for a pool party. We're all hanging out, and I spotted one of my friends standing right next to the pool, right? Fully clothed. So naturally, I snuck up behind him and I pushed him in the water. But there was one small problem. His cell phone was in his pocket. And it turns out, at least then, cell phones and water didn't mix. Even though my friend eventually laughed about it, in that moment, he began plotting his revenge, which is the natural reaction, right? Because when somebody does something to us, our first thought is payback. Now, it's one thing to want good-natured revenge for a good-natured prank, but this reaction shows up in other areas of life too. When we feel slighted, when we feel hurt, we want payback. And oftentimes this desire for revenge turns into something else, a grudge. Now, if revenge is defined by action, a grudge is almost always defined by inaction. A grudge is anger or frustration or hurt that doesn't boil over. Instead, it simmers and it hangs around and it just festers. And we can develop grudges for all kinds of reasons. Maybe you have a group of friends who generally does everything together, but then one day you run into that group at lunch without you. Now, whatever the reason for your exclusion, you're not happy about it and you don't really get over it. Or maybe you shared something really personal with a friend, only to have that friend share that secret with someone else, and you viewed that as a betrayal and you never forgot. Or maybe you developed a grudge with your family. Maybe your parents always seemed to pay more attention to your sibling. Maybe your parents weren't around much. Maybe you never felt understood by your family. Whatever the reason, maybe you've held onto a grudge with a family member your entire life. Well, no matter where it starts, here's what's interesting about a grudge. It can sometimes feel sweet to be bitter. And sometimes that grudge becomes part of who we are. And we want to hold onto that bitterness or frustration. But the truth is this: we're all going to be hurt in life. And because hurt is universal, the question is this: what do you do with the worst stuff that happens to you? What do you do about the stuff that takes a hold of you and doesn't let go? Well, today we're going to focus on a key passage in the Bible that can help us when it comes to the issue of what to do with the bitterness we feel. Now, at the beginning of the early church, the Apostle Paul played a predominant role in spreading the gospel of Jesus throughout the known world. Paul was a popular public figure in Christian culture. Well, fame can bring a sense of infamy. When you're known in that way, a lot of people love you, but chances are you have some haters too. And because Paul was such a high-profile follower of Jesus and someone who continually challenged the norms of the time, he was a big target to people who were not followers of Jesus. So here are a few ways that he suffered for publicly serving Christ. He was put into prison over and over again. He was beaten. He was flogged, which means he was beaten with a whip or a bat. How disrespectful. He was pelted with rocks. So here was a guy who was trying to help people, who was trying to serve God, who was trying to do good, and how was he treated? Not great. So if anyone deserved to be bitter, it was Paul. If anyone deserved to just simmer in their resentment, it was him. Yet with every reason to be bitter towards a whole lot of people, Paul actually responded in a surprising way. In one of his letters to the church in Thessalonica, Paul encouraged and challenged the new Christians there to live differently than the world around them. And then, in one concise sentence, Paul addressed the idea of payback. Make sure that nobody pays back wrong for wrong. Now, in our lives, paying back wrong for wrong could sound like, well, he never apologized, so I just can't forgive him. Well, they don't deserve my forgiveness or my friendship after what they did. They didn't earn my forgiveness. They haven't paid for what they did. She hurt me, so I'm going to hurt her. Now, Paul had some legitimate reasons to be upset. People were treating him badly just for how he was living his life. I would classify beatings for good behavior as overreacting. But even though Paul had suffered, and unjustly, he didn't believe that his mistreatment required revenge. Instead, he wrote, "But always strive to do what is good for each other and for everyone else." Now wait, not only are we supposed to keep ourselves from paying someone back wrong for wrong, we're supposed to think about what's good for them That doesn't exactly seem fair. And you know what? It isn't. But Paul understood a fundamental truth about bitterness and holding on to hurt, and that truth is this: the more you hold on to a grudge, the more it holds on to you. Years ago, I heard a pastor say that unforgiveness is like drinking poison and hoping the other person gets sick. Now, over time, I've always come back to that. Unforgiveness and bitterness can be a nasty cycle that we can get stuck in if we're not careful. And the more I dwell and focus on the wrong and how angry I am, the more poisonous it is to me. Now, like a lot of people, maybe like all of us, I grew up thinking that forgiveness was for the other person, the one who wronged me. But really, forgiveness is for me. Forgiveness is a conscious decision to let go of someone's debt and not expect them to make up for it. Yes, they owe me, but I can decide not to wait until they pay me back. And when we forgive, we're letting go of revenge and negative emotion, not just for the other person's benefit. The offender, the person who was wrong, doesn't always benefit from receiving forgiveness, but we can always benefit. When we start to let go of hurt and bitterness and resentment, other people no longer get to control how we feel. In fact, forgiveness takes the power away from other people. We choose to remove the poison from ourselves. Now, let's be clear. We're not saying that people who regularly treat you unfairly or abuse you or take advantage of you get a pass to keep doing it. If we're in a bad situation, then we need to make the choices necessary to get out of that situation. Instead, we're talking about the vast majority of ways that we're hurt, and that's usually with careless words or actions. Still, forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean that you aren't hurt or the other person shouldn't experience consequences, or it's not the other person's benefit, or the relationship stays the same, or you can't set boundaries, or you condone or excuse the offense, or you stay quiet if someone is hurting you or other people. But no matter the offense and no matter how we feel about it, we're called to respond in a way that feels anything but natural. Forgiveness isn't a magic band-aid that makes everything better, and it never makes what someone did okay or right, but it is the way to get rid of the poison we ingested, maybe years ago. And no matter what your relationship looks like going forward, forgiveness is the first step toward healing in you. Now, you may be thinking, I'm not really a hold a grudge type of person. So if you're wondering if you're still holding on to some bitterness or resentment, here's a handy quiz. 1, did you have arguments with someone in your head? You know, those internal conversations where you basically try them in court? 2, are you giving a close friend or family member the silent treatment? 3, do you consistently make snide comments in person or online to somebody else? 4, do you make passive-aggressive comments to somebody? Or 5, do you think about ways you can pay someone back for what they did to you 6 months ago, maybe 6 years ago? Now, if you answered yes to any of these questions, you may be holding on to a grudge. But consider this: holding on to resentment and being bitter can be bad for you. Because here's the thing, you can technically be right. You can have the truth on your side, but it doesn't change the fact that you're stuck in negativity, and that negative place can take a toll on you. When you don't forgive, you drink the poison. And over time, that poison can make you spiritually and emotionally sick. Now, many of you are stuck in some real pain. Some of you have been hurt deeply by people you care about, and that makes things complicated because your hurt is justified, and so is your anger. But I can promise you this: the only way you can find freedom from the anger and resentment is to forgive the other person, even if they don't deserve it, even if they're not sorry, maybe even especially if they're not sorry. Because what forgiveness really means is to give it before someone else is sorry or deserves anything. And I know that's asking a lot, and it won't happen overnight. But if you're ready to let go of the grudge, here are 3 ways you can get started. First, acknowledge your feelings. It's okay to be hurt and upset and angry and sad and disappointed. Pretending like these feelings aren't there doesn't make them go away. And I'm not talking about wallowing in these feelings, but it's important to first acknowledge that you're hurt. Second step, don't let your feelings control you. You can give up your right to get revenge even when your anger says, I deserve to get them back. You can work to let go of your feelings and your anger and your frustration instead of being held hostage by them. And finally, repeat. There's no overnight success to escaping bitterness. This is a process. It takes time. So keep taking one step and then take it again and then again. Listen, I get it. Forgiving someone feels like the other person is getting something from you, getting something they don't deserve. But think about this. What are you getting from holding on to your bitterness? If you could stop replaying that offense over and over in your mind, how much time would you get back? If you could let go of your need to be right, how much less stress would you feel? If you could let go of your need to make things fair, what else could you be doing? How free would you feel if you released the grudge? I know it sounds counterintuitive and unreasonable. It sounds unfair. It may even sound impossible. But even though it feels like giving up power on your end, letting go actually empowers you. It allows you to finally be released from the poisonous resentment that eats away at you and robs you of joy and life. And when we let go, and when we're kind to those who have mistreated us, we take the first step from hurt towards healing. Because forgiving someone is the best thing you can do with the worst stuff that happens to you.